It had been nearly 2 years since Mark last laid eyes on his grandfather's old lake house. Life in the city kept him chained to bustling construction sites and persistent office headaches, and the idea of cleaning out cobwebs in a creaky house 3 hours away always, somehow, fell off the to-do list. But this time, he wasn't backing out. His wife, Linda, had nagged him for months, half playfully, half dead serious, to make time. So he'd finally taken a break, loaded up the SUV with snacks, bug spray, and their son Leo's video games, and hit the road. As they rolled down the tree-lined lane that snaked toward the lake, Mark's heart actually fluttered a little. That dusty old house sat on 3 acres of prime, water-kissed land. Despite years of neglect, it had good bones, like a boxer who'd gone soft but still possessed a killer left hook. The plan was simple. Check in, assess the damage, then start mapping out a renovation strategy that wouldn't bankrupt them. Maybe even fish a little. But as they turned the final bend, something felt distinctly off. A shiny silver Range Rover was parked in the gravel drive. Beside it, a red crossover. Mark frowned. That wasn't right. No one should have been there. His grandfather was long gone, and he hadn't given a single soul permission to step foot on that land. Linda leaned forward. Mark, is someone living here? Before he could answer, he spotted movement on the deck. 2 women in swimsuits, clinking glasses of wine under his grandfather's rotting pergola. Laughter echoed across the property. A little kid darted by with a towel, nearly colliding with Leo's wide-eyed stare from the back seat. Mark killed the engine and stepped out slowly, unsure if he was about to walk into a trespassing misunderstanding or some kind of deranged open house party. A man in flip-flops approached with a relaxed smile. Hey, you must be the next guests. Brenda told us someone might be checking in later today. Mark's eyebrows almost shot off his forehead. I'm sorry, what guests? Yeah, this place is awesome. Brenda Vance hooked us up through some private site. She said the previous owner sold the place and she manages it now for the HOA. He held up his phone, displaying a reservation confirmation. The header read, Lakeside Haven, property managed by Brenda Vance. Mark took the phone, blinking hard. There it was, his house, his porch, his grill. The rate, $250 a night, weekly discounts available. Linda stepped beside him, her voice low. Mark, this is your house. What the hell is going on? He didn't answer, still staring at the listing, trying to process the absurdity. Brenda Vance. He'd heard the name some new president of the local homeowners association, a woman with a reputation for calling the cops if your grass got a half-inch too ambitious. But this? He handed the phone back. I'm going to need you all to finish your stay and be gone by the end of the week. The guy looked startled. Wait, you're not part of the rental service? No, Mark said. I'm the owner. The real one. The man laughed, awkward and unsure. Brenda said she had the rights. Yeah, Mark muttered, heading for the house. She's about to find out she didn't. That night, Mark barely slept. Not because the beds were uncomfortable hell. He hadn't even made it that far, but because he couldn't stop staring at his laptop screen, eyes burning as he clicked through site after site. There it was again and again. His house, listed as a luxury lakeside retreat, curated by Brenda Vance, and the crown jewel of our HOA-managed vacation portfolio. Portfolio? What portfolio? And since when did the HOA run vacation rentals? The listings were slick, professionally taken photos with tasteful lighting, even drone shots he'd never seen before. The grass looked too green, the shutters repainted a glossy navy, and someone had apparently installed hanging string lights along the porch railing. His porch. His damn railing. He clicked on the reviews next, and his stomach twisted. Dozens of them, going back over a year. Charming spot. Brenda was so welcoming. Great weekend getaway, loved the fire pit. We'll be back next summer. He even found a comment calling it the flagship of Lakeshore Cove HOA's hospitality program. It was like reading fanfiction written about his life by a lunatic. The next morning, while Linda took Leo into town to grab some groceries and cool off, Mark started calling every short-term rental site listed. He gave them property IDs, listing numbers, everything. Most reps were polite but cagey. They confirmed the listings existed, yes, but couldn't provide information about the hosts beyond the public profile name. Brenda Vance, executive host. He slammed the laptop shut. Mid-afternoon, He walked the perimeter of the house. New solar path lights. An upgraded garden hose rack. Freshly laid gravel under the deck. Somebody had been sprucing things up on his dime. Whether she was pocketing rental income or running some HOA-funded fantasy island, he didn't know yet, but it smelled like fraud. And then, as if summoned by the rising heat of his rage, she showed up. He heard the familiar click-clack of heels on gravel before he saw her. Blonde bob, expensive sunglasses, that tight-lipped smile you get from people who say, "I'm just trying to help," right before destroying your life. Brenda Vance. She didn't even look surprised to see him. "Oh," she said, adjusting her tote bag. "I didn't realize you were staying. Usually, the check-ins are on Fridays." "Cut the act," Mark snapped. "This is my house. You're not a realtor, you're not a manager. You're a trespasser who's been profiting off my property for over a year." Her smile didn't waver, but her tone shifted, just slightly sharper. "That's quite the claim. I've been maintaining this property in your absence. You abandoned it. The HOA had to step in. I've curated a reputation for this location, and I've invested in my house." Mark barked. "You never had my permission. You never even asked." She gave a small shrug, as if he were making a fuss about borrowed sugar. "Nobody else complained. I've enhanced community value. The guests have been lovely." "The guests," Mark muttered. "Yeah, I'll be talking to them. And the police. And a lawyer." That got her attention. Her lips tightened, her eyes narrowed behind those designer shades. "Well, that's your right," she said, her voice now dipped in ice. "But just know, HOA policy backs me. The community appreciates what I've done here." Mark stared at her. "We'll see what the law has to say about that." She turned on her heel and walked off, as if she hadn't just admitted to orchestrating the most casual burglary of the century. And Mark stood there, breathing hard, the reality setting in. This wasn't just trespassing, it was a scheme, a full-on, resort-style racket. And it was time to shut it down. The first thing Mark did the next morning was change every damn lock. Front door, back door, tool shed, even the ancient padlock on the boathouse that hadn't worked since Bush was in office. Then he installed motion lights, threw up 6 fresh, private property, no trespassing signs, and parked his truck sideways at the driveway entrance like a blockade. Subtlety was dead. Brenda had declared war, and he was done playing nice. Later that afternoon, while he was drilling the last bracket for a new gate latch, he heard tires crunching gravel. He turned around and nearly laughed. There she was again, Brenda, marching up in full battle dress collared shirt with the HOA emblem, clipboard, sunglasses flanked by 2 guys in matching black polos that read, HOA Community Security. One of them was chewing gum with the enthusiasm of a cow. The other wore tactical sunglasses like he was about to breach a meth lab. "Mr. Bennett," Brenda called, voice sweet but tight. "We are going to need access. We have a confirmed reservation checking in at 5. Mark stepped away from the gate and leaned on the fence post. "No one's checking in. Ever again. This property is closed indefinitely." One of the henchmen, Big Mike, stepped forward, puffing up like a poorly trained German shepherd. "Sir, you're interfering with HOA operations. That's a violation." "Violation of what?" Mark said. "I'm not in the HOA. This house never was. And you know it." Brenda clicked her pen and scribbled something on her clipboard. "That's debatable. We've been maintaining the grounds. Guests have been scheduled for weeks. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about community expectations." "Expectations don't override ownership," Mark said flatly. "And unless you've got a court order in that clipboard, you're all trespassing. I've got the title deed in the house and cameras running from 4 angles. Try me." Brenda narrowed her eyes. "Then I'm calling the police. You're threatening guests with unlawful occupancy denial." "Please do," Mark said, pulling out his phone. "I've been meaning to introduce myself." 20 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up. A young deputy, Miller, got out, one hand resting on his belt as he took in the scene. 3 tense HOA goons and 1 angry guy with a cordless drill. Brenda launched into her pitch, playing the victim. "This man is refusing entry to a property that's been publicly rented. He's threatening HOA staff. He's not even listed in our member directory." Deputy Miller turned to Mark. Mark handed over his ID, title documents, and a manila folder fat with listing screenshots, timestamps, and a notarized affidavit from his lawyer. After a few minutes of looking it over, he gave a long, low whistle. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Brenda. "This property legally belongs to Mr. Bennett. There's no record of transfer, lease, or HOA jurisdiction. You don't have a leg to stand on." "But he's interfering," she started, but the deputy cut her off. "You're trespassing. One more incident, and we'll start issuing citations. Is that clear?" Brenda's face twisted, but she nodded. Her goons followed like puppies kicked out of a dog park. As their SUV disappeared down the road, Mark finally exhaled. One skirmish down. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was time to stop reacting and start playing offense. Brenda was too smooth, too rehearsed. She'd built a narrative and repeated it so many times, she probably believed it herself that she was the steward of some noble rental operation, a misunderstood local heroine maintaining value while he, the absentee owner, had abandoned the place. And people believed her. Hell, she had a glowing 4.9-star rating. So, Mark decided to flip the script. That week, he called in a favor from an old friend, Alex Chun, a former college roommate who'd since gone into corporate law. Clean cut, quick on his feet, and with the sort of bland white-collar look that screamed, "I won't question anything if the wine is chilled." Perfect for a test run. He posed as a tourist, reached out to Brenda Vance through one of the rental platforms still hosting the listing. The response was almost immediate, bubbly, welcoming, and weirdly intimate. She called herself a community liaison and described the house as part of a private HOA lake experience. There was no mention of Mark, no disclaimer, not even a hint that she was acting on behalf of someone else. She sounded like she owned the place. The kicker? She even gave Alex a digital welcome packet. It had PDF maps, codes to a keypad lock Mark had already ripped out, and a document labeled Limited Property Access Agreement. It looked official, fancy formatting, a fake notary stamp, and a forged signature Mark recognized instantly his own. Mark watched as Alex forwarded the whole packet to him, every email, every message. They had her, in her own words. Still, they needed a smoking gun, something beyond screenshots. So, they went a step further. Alex arrived at the house for check-in on Saturday morning, GoPro strapped discreetly in his shirt button. As planned, he parked down the road and waited. At precisely 11:15, a silver Lexus pulled into the driveway. A middle-aged woman with over-processed hair and a clipboard stepped out. It wasn't Brenda herself, but close. Her assistant, Diane Fisher, a local real estate agent who moonlighted as Brenda's property consultant. She greeted Alex like he was a celebrity. "Welcome. We're so excited to host you. Brenda sends her best. She's tied up at the HOA meeting, but asked me to show you around." Alex played his part to perfection. "So you guys own this place?" "Oh yes," Diane chirped. "It's part of the HOA portfolio now. The previous owner signed over access a while back. Some kind of legal trust thing. Brenda manages it all." Alex casually asked, "So this isn't like someone else's property?" Diane waved him off. No, all perfectly authorized. You're in good hands." And just like that, they had it on video. Fraud, a fake management claim, a direct lie about ownership. After Diane left, Alex texted Mark one sentence. She walked right into it. Mark almost laughed out loud. This wasn't just a case of someone squatting with charm. It was organized theft, a boutique scam with wine tastings and towel service. And now he had the proof to burn it all down. With Diane Fisher's little monologue captured on video, the walls around Brenda's rental kingdom were starting to buckle. But something still didn't add up. There was too much polish, too many upgrades. Mark hadn't authorized a single dime to be spent on his property, yet somehow the house looked like it had been curated by a Pinterest-obsessed real estate agent on a stimulant binge. So, Mark went digging. He pulled the HOA's publicly available annual budget reports, those dry little PDFs no one ever reads, and spent 3 evenings in the lake house with his laptop and a bottle of cheap scotch, clicking through every line item like a forensic accountant with a personal grudge. And there it was. Listed under Community Enhancements and Shared Use Spaces were entries like Lakeside Gazebo Repairs, $3,400, Deck Restoration Lakeside Zone, $7,600, and the one that made him spit whiskey. Jacuzzi Replacement Premium Unit, $11,200. There was only one lakeside gazebo in the neighborhood, The next morning, he tracked down an old contact, a landscaping contractor who used to work under one of his crews back in the city. He gave him the address and asked if he'd ever done work out here. His reply, a photo of an invoice addressed to Lakeshore HOA. Worksite listed as Mark's property, and signed by none other than Brenda Vance. That was it. She'd been laundering HOA funds to make his house rental ready, probably spinning it as a shared amenity for the neighborhood. In reality, she was boosting her rental income while HOA dues paid for the string lights and lawn treatments. But the real kicker came the day Mark got a call from Frank Olson, a guy he'd never met, but who turned out to be the former treasurer of the HOA. He'd heard through the grapevine that someone was finally pushing back on Brenda. They met at a diner, and over greasy eggs, Frank spilled everything. "She pushed me out," he said, shaking his head. "I raised concerns about the finances funds being spent on non-HOA parcels, invoices that didn't match the maps." A month later, he was voted out in a closed-door meeting. "She runs that board like a cult." Then Frank leaned in. "And here's something no one wants to talk about. She has a record. Fraud, petty real estate scam, back in Nevada about 10 years ago. She changed her name, used her maiden name, Milligan, on HOA filings to dodge background checks." Mark froze. "You're serious?" Frank nodded. "I found it the day she was nominated. I flagged it. They ignored me, said it was too late to reconsider." Mark stared at his coffee like it had betrayed him. This woman wasn't just bold, she was experienced. That night, his lawyer, Robert Quinn, ran a check using her original name, Brenda Milligan. And there it was, convicted of wire fraud and falsifying property records in 2012. Pled out, sealed in most databases, but not sealed enough. They gathered everything into a tidy little folder labeled Predatory History, Exhibit C. If Brenda thought her little rental circus could survive in daylight, she was about to find out what it felt like to get scorched. It happened at 2:42 a.m. Not that Mark was asleep. He'd been sitting in the living room with a mug of burnt coffee and a loaded browser tab of how to file a civil suit against a homeowners association. That's when his phone buzzed. Motion detected, backyard west fence. He glanced at the screen. 3 heat blobs on the thermal overlay. One of them was wearing a backpack. Another held what looked suspiciously like bolt cutters. The third had a damn clipboard. No way. He stepped to the window and peeked through the blinds. There they were, like raccoons in Lululemon, dressed all in black. Well, black and tactical beige. They were crouched near his fence, whispering and gesturing like they were about to breach an embassy, not hop into a middle-aged man's backyard. And leading the charge? Brenda Vance, in yoga pants and a windbreaker with HOA president printed in Comic Sans on the back. Mark nearly choked on his coffee. He switched to his phone camera, hit record, and dialed 911. He didn't whisper. He wanted them to hear him. "Hi. Yes, this is Mark Bennett. I've got 3 trespassers trying to enter my private property. One appears to be my local HOA president. They're wearing all black and carrying tools. No, this is not a joke." Outside, the bolt cutters went chink, and a chain hit the grass. They were through the side gate. Brenda held up a flashlight like Gandalf leading a fellowship of morons. Diane Fisher, yup, their dear real estate fairy, was right behind her, gripping a folder like it was the Constitution. The third guy, Mark recognized as Big Mike, one of her so-called HOA security staff. He was built like a vending machine and had the situational awareness of a carrot. They crept past the koi pond and made a beeline toward the back deck. Diane muttered, "Do you think he's here?" Brenda whispered back, "Doesn't matter. We're just performing an emergency property audit." "Emergency audit, my ass." Mark walked out onto the porch and flipped on the floodlights. 3 deer in headlights. Brenda's clipboard fell into the hydrangeas. "Evening," Mark said. "Bit early for a brunch meeting, don't you think?" Big Mike froze mid-step. Diane took an actual step back, heels sinking into the mulch. Brenda recovered fastest, of course. "This property is under HOA inspection," she barked, with the confidence of someone who had clearly rehearsed this moment in the mirror. "You're obstructing official community business." "You're breaking and entering," Mark replied. "And there's about to be a 4th person joining this conversation. He has a badge." As if on cue, headlights lit up the trees. Sheriff's cruiser, blue and red strobes painting the scene like a low-budget rave. Deputy Miller stepped out. blinking like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Brenda? Why are you on this man's property at 2:45 in the morning?" She straightened her spine. "Officer, we're investigating irregularities in community access. I have authorization." Miller cut her off. "You do not. I've reviewed the case. This property is not under HOA jurisdiction. And unless you're auditioning for a very stupid reboot of Ocean's 11, I suggest you shut it down." Big Mike raised his hands. "I was just here to carry stuff." "Yeah," Mark said. "Like the bolt cutters." Brenda sputtered. "You don't understand. This property is vital to community image. It belongs to us, in spirit." Deputy Miller pulled out his cuffs. "Brenda Vance," he said calmly, "you are under arrest for trespassing, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit unlawful entry, and possibly my favorite, bringing a clipboard to a felony." As he clicked the cuffs, she yelled, "This is a witch hunt. I am the face of this neighborhood. I have rights." He guided her toward the cruiser. "And I have a booking sheet. Let's compare notes." As the cruiser drove off, lights fading, Mark stood barefoot on his deck in pajama pants and a robe, sipping what was left of his coffee. Not a bad start to the morning. Courtroom smelled like polish and tension, a mix of lemon disinfectant, old wood, and suppressed rage. Brenda sat at the defendant's table in a navy blue blazer at least 2 sizes too tight for her ego, her expression a masterclass in performative outrage. Diane fidgeted. Big Mike wasn't present. He'd flipped and taken a plea deal. Mark's lawyer, Robert Quinn, silver-haired and steel-nerved, stood tall. Opening statements were fire and gasoline. Brenda's defense tried to argue a misunderstood property arrangement. Quinn simply said, "We'll prove otherwise," with her own words, her forged documents, and her previous felony record. The courtroom stirred. Brenda's eyes twitched. Over the next 3 days, Quinn brought out everything. Video of Diane, copies of invoices paid from HOA funds, screenshots from Brenda's rental accounts, the fraudulent welcome packet with the forged signature, and finally, her prior conviction for wire fraud in Nevada under her maiden name, Brenda Milligan. When that detail hit, it was like someone dropped a bowling ball in a kiddie pool. The jury took less than 4 hours. Verdict: guilty on all civil counts. Criminal charges: trespassing, attempted fraud, falsifying records, illegal short-term rental income, misuse of HOA funds. The sentence: 1 year probation, 500 hours of community service, full restitution to Mark in the amount of $85,000, plus $27,000 in legal expenses, and a permanent bar from holding any HOA-related office anywhere. When the judge asked if Mark had anything to say, he stood. "I just want my house back. Without tourists, trespassers, or tactical clipboards." Even the court reporter laughed. Brenda didn't. Her empire had crumbled. 3 weeks later, they held a party, a real one. Friends, neighbors, family, hot dogs, beer. They called it the Unbooking Barbecue. Everyone from the new HOA board came. Turns out Brenda's downfall inspired half the community to vote her cronies out. One elderly neighbor even brought a piñata shaped like a clipboard. It died swiftly and loudly. But the moment everyone remembers happened just before sunset. Leo and Mark were up on the ladder, tools in hand, mounting a new custom metal sign onto the front gate. When Mark stepped down, Linda handed him a cold beer and pointed to the small crowd gathering to read it. The sign read, "Private property. Not for rent. Not for HOA. If your name is Brenda, turn around." Below that, in smaller letters, "Trespassers will be fed to the koi." Seriously, people cheered. Someone played "Another One Bites the Dust." Even Deputy Miller showed up later and asked to take a selfie with the sign. As dusk fell over the lake and laughter drifted through the trees, Mark leaned back in his chair and looked at the house. His house. No strangers in the hot tub, no forged contracts, no HOA ninjas lurking in the bushes. Just peace, family, and the faint glow of a string light he'd actually approved. And if Brenda ever tried to step foot on his property again, well, the koi were hungry.